Hello, I'm your host Ben Bilsland, Head of Technology at RSM UK, and welcome to our first episode in our new series, The Loop Talking Tech. In this series, we'll bring you insightful conversations with experts from across technology, media, and digital sectors, as well as professionals from within RSM. We'll discuss the real-life opportunities and challenges faced by businesses, which will range from the latest tech advancements to strategic initiatives and the broader impact of the economy. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the impact tech businesses have on the UK economy. And to do so, I'm joined by Tom Pugh, RSM UK's own economist. So Tom, thanks for joining me.
Hi Ben, great to be here.
How does the Loop Studio compare to the BBC?
This is very snazzy.
I like it, it's good,
It's
isn't it?
really good upgrade. I'm really liking it.
So we thought we'd start, big. What does tech mean to the UK economy in your view? How does tech make up the bigger picture?
There's a huge amount of chat around tech, how tech's important for the UK. It's one of our key growth areas. We had the government announcement, all of this kind of stuff. And it's all true, but I think it's true for probably slightly different reasons than most people appreciate. There is if we look at the tech sector directly, that's a super important industry for a number of reasons. Well, one, it tends to be very well paid. It tends to be very productive. We know the UK has a trouble with productivity. So a growing tech sector will help with that to the extent that tech firms can be very profitable, is useful for tax revenue, profits, all of that kind of thing. It is great. But ultimately, the tech sector itself is only ever going to be a relatively small part of the economy. Even in the US, where it's much larger than here, it's still a pretty small share of the actual economy. The far more important part is how that tech filters out through the rest of the economy. So it's not necessarily that we need the UK tech sector to be absolutely amazing. We do, that'd be fantastic. But the way that impacts everybody else in the economy is other firms in the economy making use of that tech. So manufacturing industries making use of it, how it improves our health services, education, how it improves the things that we do in kind of RSM and our professional services environment, how that increases the productivity in the rest of the economy. And I think that's quite a different question to saying, how does this relatively narrow definition of a tech sector boost the economy?
Well, because we talk a lot about things that can be done to boost the tech sector, government announcements, funding, other innovation. I suppose my question is will it make a difference, the bigger picture? So I think what you're saying is yes, but not necessarily a simple situation that if you turn on tech, it activates all aspects. It's more about how it creates what I guess we might call a network effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's that network effect. It's how the rest of the economy leverages those tech improvements. And there is, you want a great tech sector, well, partly because, as we talked about before, it's productive, it's well-paying, etc., etc. But also, it's easier to filter out tech in the local environment if you have a strong tech sector. If you have to go to America to find the solution to your productivity problems for every business in the UK, that is it's an extra barrier, it's extra cost, it's extra expense, and we don't build that network effect in the UK. So by having a strong UK tech sector, it helps diffuse that productivity enhancement to the rest of the economy.
Talk about UK, US later. But it's a good time to turn to the announcement about artificial intelligence, which is a part of the tech sector as a software product. So I just thought I'd read through some of the information from the government announcement. So, the objective is to encourage AI investment in Britain. That includes developing AI growth zones, the first of which will be in Culham in Oxfordshire, to increase the public compute capacity by 20-fold. So that's going to give us processing power to embrace this new tech. A new dedicated unit, which is established to partner with private sector and help the government seize opportunities. The establishment of a national data library. And then an AI Energy Council. So that's a dedicated body chaired by the Science and Energy Securities secretaries, which work with energy companies. And all of this, in the announcement talks about a productivity gain of 1.5%. It could be worth 47 billion each year over the next decade. What stands out to you from that announcement as an economist?
I think from that list, let me take a positive and a not quite a negative, but a
Yeah.
challenge. So the positive is that the way the UK essentially health service is structured means we have a relatively unique, enormous database
Mm,
that is not currently being properly used. The opportunity there is enormous, and this is one of the areas I know the government has
mm,
focused on, is being able to get tech to make better use of that database. How, rather than just selling the database to a tech company,
mm,
it's more of a partnership with tech firms setting up here access to that database, what you can learn from it.
mm.
I think that is a huge and pretty unique benefit to the UK,
Right.
that if you want access to that NHS database or one of our other big national databases, you come here, you set up here, you do the work here. I think that is a really unique and pretty attractive proposition to a
So,
lot of those tech firms.
so you're saying the data library
The data
compels
library,
businesses to come to the
yeah,
UK to develop.
because tech is, what is tech if it's not data?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
data is pretty unique, big data. You don't find much bigger databases than the NHS or some of the other social services
Mm.
stuff. You're not going to be able to get access to that elsewhere.
So what is that? That's a kind of monetizing an asset we have as a country.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges,
Mm.
the big challenge here, is on that last point you mentioned around energy.
Yeah.
We know that the UK has a significant energy problem.
Mm.
This is not just a tech thing. It's an across the economy thing.
Mm.
If you're a manufacturing firm looking to set up a new factory, you can't, because you can't get connected to the grid. Same thing for data. We know that UK energy prices are 3, 4, 5 times higher than they are in our peer countries.
Yeah.
We know that AI data centers are incredibly energy intensive.
Mm.
So one, if you want to set up these kind of centers in the UK, how are you going to power them
Mm.
when we are already struggling for power to, power the 1.5 million
Mm.
new houses that the government wants to buy?
Yeah.
There's just not enough to go round at this point. So
Mm.
that is a key issue. And the second is the cost. Why would you build a data center in the UK
Mm.
when your running costs are going to be 3, 4, 5 times higher than if you built that data center elsewhere? 20% of the electricity in Ireland is used for data centers. Something like 2-3% in the UK.
Yeah.
So we're an order of magnitude off,
Mm.
and I do not see where that power can come from
Mm.
in the relative short term.
But is that, and maybe this question is something which we don't know the answer to yet. We need data centers to do everything, like even just processing the cloud, like a PowerPoint document requires access to data centers. It's a very different kind of data center to an AI compute data center, isn't it? So, does the challenge exist here around all energy and therefore data centers? Because the more energy we consume using technology, the more we'll need. Or is it specifically focused on, you know, a goal to create kind of world leading AI data centers?
I don't think you are going to be able to create a
Mm.
world leading AI data center asset
Mm.
without addressing the energy issues
Yeah.
first.
Mm.
I think that's a necessary and sufficient condition.
Yeah. But that affects everything, doesn't it? That's
Yeah,
just, it's a
absolutely.
great example of a tech factor, which is not just, use of energy affects all areas of the
Yeah.
economy as well. Like, and, in your view, where does it sit against other needs? If you look at the economy more generally, actually, are all things equal? Do some things need more energy? What's the kind of economic view of what's going to help us in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, energy is one of the key factors that's been holding back the UK economy. It's one of the reasons why we are relatively unproductive
Mm.
compared to the US. It's an issue that's holding back every sector
Yeah.
of the economy. not just tech.
And do we need more power or cheaper power or both?
Both.
And then, of course, we need cooling,
Yeah.
which is the other side of it, because these things create an awful lot of heat.
Yeah.
Um, so,
And well, this is I mean, we've not even started, but water is the other issue. We haven't built a new reservoir in 30 years.
yeah.
We have all of those challenges with water issues. So again, it's if you want to build this kind of data
Mm,
centric economy, how are you going to power it?
mm,
How are you going to get those other resources that you need? How are you going to address that cost issue?
mm.
So they're the big challenges. The UK has a lot going for it in terms of we're already the third largest AI or tech center. So we're already a little way down the road of building
Yeah.
that kind of network.
By a lot of measures, we are a global lead in AI,
Yeah.
albeit a lot of the infrastructure and the developments in the United States. We have a highly developed ecosystem, lots of good ideas coming out.
Yeah.
We have hosted summits on how these things are regulated. We are in a position where we can control our kind of regulation because we're not within the European Union or the United States. So we have options, I suppose. There is a challenge around capital investment, which is the enormous amount of money being deployed in the United States in this area, which is hard to meet. So I kind of agree with you. We're in a position. And I suppose what you're saying is actually, of all the things we talked about, the AI Energy Council is the thing that you're saying, actually, that's crucial. We need to get that right. Because that's a potential tripping point for
I
us.
think for me, that's the one thing that stands out as something that is going to be very difficult to fix because you're not just trying to fix it for the tech industry.
Yeah.
You've got to fix it for the whole economy.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental part of kind of what's gone wrong for the last 20 years. And it's not going to be a case of just, having a group of a council that decides some policies. This is going to be a whole government, whole economy thing, and it's going to take a long time.
So, Tom, one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is like the US versus the UK. I suppose from my position, sitting, in the tech ecosystem, as we're often compared to the US, we look to it for ideas and inspiration. Their economy to me looks different in lots of ways. One of which is their largest businesses by market capitalization are tech platform companies. So, what are your thoughts around, okay, I guess, the role of tech in the US economy versus the role of tech in the UK economy?
Yeah, I think it's one of the obvious differences when you
Mm.
look at the two countries, especially when you look at the two stock markets.
Yeah.
It's a really, really stark difference. I think the thing that the US has done really well is create this essentially a tech network effect.
Mm.
In a similar way to how the City of London grew up around financial services, that you have the banks, the market traders, and all of that infrastructure around to support that,
Mm.
you then become a hub for financial services, which attracts that talent in. So for the whole of Europe and to some degree the world, finance professionals came to London to work.
Yeah.
The same is true of the US for tech. So you have these tech companies, you have all of the associated services sitting around them. You have everybody interested in tech, working in tech, moving to this area. And it creates this hub or a network there that's very, very difficult to compete with once it's been established, because it's the place to go if you're a tech company or if you want to work in tech. Something the UK doesn't have, something the UK it will be very difficult to build simply because the US has it has this, the scale is the number one issue. It has the capital markets, it has the users. It's just the scale of the economy allows them to do this.
I think there's a distinction I just pull out, which is it's not as simple as bigger is always better just on like share valuation or revenue numbers. Like these tech businesses are composed really differently. I'll just draw some examples here. Let's take Apple. Apple has global revenues of almost $400 billion, but does so with 164,000 employees, which is incredibly efficient. And that's because the software does the work. And then you take a business like Amazon, which is, as well as being a tech platform, a streaming business, a logistics business, in some ways a consumer products business, so many things, much more complex, has 1.5 million employees, off revenues of 155 billion. So it's not, is it as simple, Tom, as just one tech company is good? Actually, what they do does influence the world around them in slightly different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. These tech companies are highly productive.
Yeah.
Each worker produces a huge amount of value as measured by
Yeah.
kind of revenue. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of that translates into economic growth
Yeah.
in the way that we typically think about it, because you typically think about an economy is the amount of goods and services
Yeah.
produced in that economy.
Mm.
So to what extent is Apple or probably Facebook
Yeah.
producing goods and services in the US economy, and as
Mm.
to what degree it's just kind of located there
Mm.
will have a different impact on the actual economic output to something like Amazon,
Mm.
where there is clearly a huge amount of economic activity going on within that.
Mm.
But ultimately, if you have a very well-paid workforce,
Mm.
you have a very profitable company located
Mm.
in the US, that is going to be good for the US economy,
Yeah.
even if not, maybe not quite as good for the economy as would appear on face value.
Yeah, because a lot of the narrative around policy under this government and previous governments, let's create the next emergent tech, you know, super platform. And we don't really know what that is. In the 90s, probably no one could predict what would happen with the tech companies we're talking about today. And indeed, Nvidia, arguably 5 years ago, no one quite expected Nvidia to do what they did, apart from the people who either were invested or running it.
Yeah.
I think we all look back on that and think, in retrospection, they were in a really, really good place.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about Nvidia a bit and like how its role in the US does position the US into like a different place, doesn't it? Like, again, is it that halo effect? And we talk a lot about the Chips Act. You know, what does that mean for the US? And I suppose, having thought about what it means to the US, what might it mean for us here in the UK?
Yeah. It's not just Nvidia. I think it's coming back to this point. It's this a group of factors.
Yeah.
It's the fact that energy prices are low in the US. It's that the Chips Act and the government support around it means it's very easy to get planning to do this kind of thing. There's a construction sector that has built lots of data centers and whatever. There's
Probably
a
worth
whole
summarizing what the Chips Act is a little bit,
yeah,
isn't it?
like, yeah.
It's hard, an act designed to fund semiconductor design and manufacturing, isn't it? With enormous, allocating $52.7 billion into chip manufacturing, which are like eye-watering amounts, to onshore this point from the United States. The EU has a similar act, actually. Nowhere near as much, but still, I think billions of pounds. Sorry to interrupt. It's probably worth talking about what that
No,
is before
absolutely.
exploring it.
And then, so if you're a tech company, if you're
Yeah.
looking at investing somewhere
Mm.
and you're looking at all the various different jurisdictions around the world, well, the US is offering you cheap land, cheap energy, government subsidies. There's a workforce already there. There's a giant tech network there versus, say, the UK with the stuff that we talked about before, the planning issues, energy issues. There's not as much government support. The network's not quite as big. I think it's a difficult case to sell, to the UK and to Europe and elsewhere in the world, really. So the US is as much as it seems to be capturing a lot of this global investment that's going into tech.
Yeah. It's pretty worth touching on too. These US tech businesses, they are enormous and they are global, I suppose. So actually compelling them to put footprints into the United Kingdom is probably important for us. Indeed, then they do have important presences here and in Ireland and other areas of Europe. So their strength probably helps us in some ways, but actually there's a big gap, isn't there, between us and them in terms of the way we approach tech.
There's a huge gap. Yeah, there's a huge gap. And it's not, I think it would be a mistake to go down the route of trying to compete subsidies with subsidies.
Yeah.
What was the number you quoted was 50 odd billion.
It's just not realistic.
It's just not realistic. We can't match that kind of thing. The EU can't match those kind of numbers.
Mm.
So we need to think where can we really try and be competitive, and how can we help firms move here? And that's things around, we've got a highly educated workforce. We're already a leader in a lot of this kind of a lot of these areas. There's the regulation point that you mentioned before. So all of these are the things that we've kind of got a comparative advantage in, rather than just trying to compete on that dollar for dollar subsidy cost.
I mean, look, Tom, there's so much to explore here. What's your takeaway? Like, what's the most important thing on the agenda when we talk about the economy and we talk about tech's role? What sort of things do you think make the biggest impact?
The number one thing for me is this diffusion of tech through the rest of the economy.
Yeah.
So there is this huge focus on bringing tech firms to the UK, and that's very, very important. But I would love to see an equal focus on how does the government help firms that aren't in the tech industry adopt that cutting edge technology?
Yeah.
Because that's when you get productivity increases across the economy. That's when we all start to see some real wage increases, where we all become better off. So that's the focus that I think is missing a bit at the minute.
And that ultimately unlocks this £47 billion productivity benefit, which helps us all move forward. Look, what a great way to end. Thanks, Tom, for joining me today. For more insights and to read our Technology Outlook report, please visit the RSM UK website and follow The Loop for more lively discussions.